But yeah, long story short, that's why I'm not allowed within 50 feet of anyone wearing a Santa Claus outfit.
Is it just specifically a Santa Claus outfit, or could it be like, Easter Bunny, Thanksgiving, anything like that, or is it just that holiday specifically?
Just that holiday specific, and also, strangely enough, just North Carolina. So
Oddly specific, but we'll take it. Oh, also, I forgot to quickly share my screen with you because I know you like to read along.
I do. I comprehend better when I read.
Oh, wow. Welcome to another episode of Duds of War. This week it is just me and Clint. Garrison is probably still asleep. Don is probably dealing with kids as usual. Not his, but just kids. No, I
Yeah.
think they are his. Yeah.
Well,
He likes to pretend they're not his, I think.
yeah. Well, it depends. If he's at work, he's dealing with adult tweakers, and if he's home, he's dealing with his kids.
And between you and me, there's not real much difference between those two, to be honest. It's
No.
a bit like toddlers and drunks.
Yeah.
Like if you
It's all
really think about it,
babysitting.
it's all the same. I mean, toddlers and drunks, you spend all night looking after them to make sure they don't do something stupid. They can't speak properly. They can't walk properly. They can't eat properly. They spill everything around the place. They act very stupid. Get very emotional on the turn of a dime. They throw up a lot, and the next morning they're very grumpy after a late night. I mean, there isn't really a difference, except drunks spend more money to get drunk. Toddlers just do it with that shit for free.
Right? That's actually a great comparison and contrast right there.
Yeah, it is also the reason why I'll never be the sober one, because fuck dealing with that. I'd rather be the one who wakes up in the morning not remembering any stupid thing. Actually, I have a rule. I actually have a rule with my mates on that. Do a proper night out, and the next morning when you're doing the recap, if someone says, "Do you remember?" and I say, "Nope, don't want to." Nope. If my brain has not recorded that and put it in the memory banks, it's probably for a reason, and I don't need to know it.
That's a good way to look at
it. Oh, mate. Well, then you don't wake up with the fear of, what did I do? It's like, I don't know what I did. Cool. No one's calling me about anything. Nope. Cool. Ignorance is truly bliss, and I'm feeling very blissful.
And then 9 months later, you get a call going, "Hey, you want to meet your kid?"
Yeah, I'm never that lucky on a night out. Most of the time, it's just recollecting pickup lines I shouldn't use again. I could write a book. A bit like Harrison's book.
Oh wow, that many pages.
Anyway, enough of drunks and toddlers and stuff like that. We should probably get on to talking about the truly stupid, the maniacal, and the downright idiotic. And this week, we are going to be talking about the Mars automatic pistol. Pistols. Universally, very simple. The Mars, no. However, it was built during a time where automatics or semi-automatics, depends on how you want to your phrases and terminologies and stuff like that. But basically, when you're talking about a handgun, same thing back in the day. But we're going to be talking about the Mars automatic pistols, at the time one of the most powerful handguns in the world, although not for a very long time, as we're going to talk about. But I think before we get to that, because the Mars came along around 1902, which, in terms of timeline for handguns, it's about this time where you start seeing automatic handguns or semi-automatics or self-loading, that's another term, all basically meant the same thing back in the day. We'll say self-loading because that's modern day terminology. So around this time, 1880s to 1910s, even 1920s, the self-loading handgun was very new, we'll say. And in fact, first off, before we start talking about the Mars, because it's so new, it is part of that generation of trying to move from revolvers to self-loading. So we're going to talk a little bit about that history of coming up to that. So to start with, semi-automatic pistols are handguns that fire once every time you pull the trigger, then automatically reload and get ready to fire again using some of the energy from the shot. They're often called self-loading pistols for that reason. It loads itself. Although technically, revolvers fall under that because they do the same thing. It automatically rotates the cylinder whenever you pull back the hammer, except for some.
Yeah, I mean, there's single action, double action.
Yeah, double actions you could classify as a self-loading. Single action, you can call that your self-loading.
Yeah. Still faster than, the old, musket, so.
While they're more mechanically complex than revolvers, they offer faster shooting and can hold more rounds. Primarily, that was the main reason people started looking into self-loading. 6 rounds only does you so much, although even then, early pistols only carried 7, maybe 8. And to be honest, the faster shooting, I mean, you've seen revolver competition shooting and stuff like that. You can still fan a pistol pretty fast, revolver pretty fast. Accuracy is not really there.
Yeah. I mean, my 44 mag, it's like I shoot it single action just because the hammer pulls so hard in double action that trying to shoot in double action, you're less accurate.
You end up with sizable biceps on your index finger. However, there is also one additional benefit of a self-loading versus a revolver. Unlike revolvers, they don't have a gap between the chamber and the barrel, which means less power is lost, and there is no risk of bits of the bullet breaking off, things that don't line up perfectly. Also would apply to, the very early revolvers where they're, they don't have a cartridge. They're ball and shot type affairs.
Oh, yeah, buddy mine's got one. He's got a Ruger Old Army.
Yeah. They had a bit of a nasty habit sometimes if you weren't careful with loading it, instead of firing one chamber, you fire all 6 at the same time. Just virtue of sympathetic detonation. You get sparks going everywhere, and gunpowder and sparks are a match made in heaven. Hence why there's another rifle that I want to talk about in another episode, the Colt revolving rifle. A bit prone to it, and of course you have a hand in front of that cylinder.
Have you ever heard of the Nagant M1895 revolver?
Of course I have. It's a very cool revolver.
That's a Russian revolver that can be shot suppressed.
Yeah, and they actually did for a while. It actually looks really cool with the suppressor on it.
It does, but yeah, I just happened to think about that. The cylinder actually moves up and seats tight against the barrel when it's fired.
You want to know another interesting fact about the Nagant revolver?
What's that?
Have you ever looked at the actual rounds?
Yes. Again, a buddy of mine's got one. It's they got a really long neck on them.
Yeah, that's because when the chamber pushes forward, it actually presses the shell casing against the barrel. That's why it sticks out like that.
I never thought about that.
So it actually fully seals it, which means that's why you can suppress it as well, because you can't suppress a normal revolver. You got all the loud bloody noise in the back. Sticking a suppressor on the front's not going to do shit. Whereas Nagant, since it fully seals itself before firing, also Nagant holds 7 rounds instead of 6.
Yes, I think it does.
Yeah. And funnily enough, Soviet tankers preferred the revolver over the TT-33 for a sidearm inside tanks. Just a little fun fact behind that one. So the idea behind semi-automatic pistols has actually been around for a long time. As far back as 1664, believe it or not.
That's a long time.
A lot of technology is older. The concept of technology is older than you think.
Yes,
Sir Robert Moray described the basic concept to the Royal Society in London. He had a general idea, but it wasn't until the 1890s that it became practical to build, thanks to advancements in ammo and firearm technology, such as, cartridge rounds, as opposed to, paper match and all of that. You can't. I mean, I'd love to see a self-loading pistol with, ball shot and cap, but I haven't any idea how you'd figure that one out.
no idea.
Yeah, but it's funny, like the amount of technology that was like they knew of the idea decades, centuries before. They just didn't have the technology for that. Take the jet engine, believe it or
Yeah.
not. That was conceptualized like before World War One. They had an idea of how it would work, and this is like before we'd actually figured out. This is around the time we just figured out how to fly, and they're like, we have a concept for a jet. We can't build it though because they haven't got the technology. Although, and then literally like 30 years later, they did sort of.
Yeah.
They weren't that good. You know what the service life of the ME-262 engines were?
It was something like 400 hours, wasn't it?
Try 12.
Ooh.
In combat conditions, a 262's engines had a service life of 12 hours before they had to be replaced.
Damn.
Yeah. So, So, even though semi-automatic pistols, we have a lot of tangents today, but I'm loving it.
Yeah, it works.
Even though semi-automatic pistols were praised as the cutting edge of handgun design, not everyone was sold on them at first. Critics, who had a point, argued that these newfangled guns were more prone to jamming and mechanical issues than the simpler battle-proven revolvers. That is true. It is pretty difficult to get a revolver to jam. Not impossible.
Yeah.
Not impossible. Nothing's ever impossible, but, mechanically, a revolver is a bit more reliable.
Yeah.
As long as you look after them. Revolvers also had the edge when it came to handling powerful rounds like the 357 or 44 Magnum, thanks to their tough, rigid frames. Although, let's be honest, modern beasts like the Desert Eagle and 50 AE have kind of flipped that argument on its head. But again, that's thanks to advancements in technology, metallurgy, stuff like that. Now you have the Desert Eagle, the Automag, which you have. Is it the Automag?
I got an Automag, yep.
Is that in 50 or 44?
It's in a 50 Action Express. It's very similar to 1911. The Automag is just a lot beefier.
Yeah. Is there a different? Because there's 250 rounds for the handguns, isn't it? The AE, and then there's another one, isn't there?
There's the 50 Beowulf, which I think you could probably find a handgun chambered in that, but that's more of it's a short round, but it's considered a high-powered cartridge. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. And of course, military bureaucrats, in their usual cautious selves, were very wary of giving soldiers guns that fired too quickly. Their thinking was that if you let troops shoot too fast, they'd just burn through ammo like it was going out of style. I mean, some truth to that.
Yeah, kinda.
Yeah. Still, despite the pushback, semi-autos kept evolving, becoming more reliable and efficient over time, and eventually took over as the go-to sidearm for most armed forces. By the 20th century, all major powers eventually made semi-automatic pistols their standard sidearms. The US and Germany were already using them in the World War One. Just reference the Colt 1902, the Colt 1911 for the Americans, although they did have the... who made the M1917 revolver? That wasn't Colt again, was it?
Let me check really quick.
Yeah, because at the time,
I want
during the...
say it was Thompson, but let me see.
So the US, the Germans, of course, had the C96 Mauser, the P08 Luger, The Americans also had the C93, which is a very odd-looking handgun. Apparently, it wasn't that good though. But there's still. I think it was Teddy Roosevelt carried one. I want to
Smith and
say.
Wesson, 1917.
Smith and Wesson, 1917. Very cool handgun. Another tangent again. So
Oh,
that was
actually,
chambered.
Smith and Wesson and Colt both made the M1917, and they was both slightly different. So there you go.
Of course. You want to know a little fun fact about that one?
What's that?
So that was chambered in 45 ACP, same as the M1911, right?
Mm-hmm.
However, what's the difference between a standard pistol round, like say anything for a revolver, and the 45?
You talking about centerfire?
Nope, not specifically. Rimless. 45 ACP
Yeah.
is rimless, right? However, you need a rim on a revolver cartridge because that's how they work, right?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, because if there's no rim, you push them all the way through. They won't seat properly. If it just doesn't work. They need that rim to push, and then also for extraction as well.
Yeah.
So what they did was they made half moon clips or full moon clips, they called them, and basically you'd clip the rounds into the clip and then push them in. So you'd have like a clip of 3. And that would push in, and that would give the 45 ACP a rim, basically.
Huh. I did not know that.
Yeah, you should look them up. They're pretty cool. But of course, during the chaos of war and of course massive demand for weapons, they had to fall back on revolvers to fill in gaps. Because of course, again, at this point, even with industrial age and stuff like that, making something a bit more complex and machined like self-loading pistols did take a bit longer than most. So, when you've got a war of millions, you just get what you get, and you need to make things fast. However, by World War II, most countries had fully switched to self-loading pistols for their troops. That being said, some nations, Britain, gave semi-autos a shot during World War One, as we're going to talk about soon, but weren't totally convinced. They stuck with revolvers all the way through World War II, sticking with what they know best. Although, of course, we're talking about the Webley Mark IV, which is such an iconic revolver. They were still being used, although later in World War II, they started changing to the Browning High Power.
Yes.
Which is also very cool.
It is. I had a chance to buy one several years ago, and I kicked myself for not doing it.
Why didn't you? You have to explain this one.
Well, okay, it's been more than a couple years ago. It's probably been like 10. But I bought my M1 Garand at the same time and didn't have money for both.
So it was an either or.
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, the high power was cheap enough. I think they wanted like $250 for it. But again, I didn't have enough for after buying the Garand.
I think you made the right choice there.
Oh, I do too.
Although now you have all this 9mm ammunition.
Right.
So the Mars automatic pistol concept. So Britain was pretty late to the party when it came to developing semi-automatic pistols, and hung on to the revolver longer than anyone else. The British famous for changing tradition. The few semi-autos they did manage to produce in any real numbers weren't exactly winners. They tended to handle poorly and weren't much to look at either. One of the first was the massive Gabbett Fairfax Mars self-loading pistol, which showed up around 1895. Designed by Hugh W. Gabbett Fairfax, it caught the attention of Webley and Scott, and in 1899 they teamed up to try and get it into production. Webley's crew cranked out a handful of handmade test models in a bunch of calibers, 8.5, 9mm, 360, 10mm, and 45 long. But the design never really came together. Yeah, I think 45 long was also known as the 450 Mars, which is one hell of a round, I can tell you that. So The 450 Mars was the showpiece of Hugh W. Gabbett Fairfax's. Fuck me, he needs a shorter name. Pistol designs. Basically his magnum opus, and also one hell of a magnum, both literally and figuratively. 450 Mars. That is have a look at the
I'm googling that.
Google it. It's massive. When Webley and Scott built it, it was a real work of art. Blue steel finish, finely checkered walnut grips, precision machining that screamed quality. It also had a detachable box magazine that slid through the base of the grip, holding between 8 to 10 rounds. And some
Well, that's
models
not
could
that
even
big of
be.
a bullet.
Pardon?
That's not that big of a bullet. I was thinking something, like a 45 long Colt. Yeah,
Don't worry.
that's a fairly small round.
You say that. Some models could even be fitted with detachable shoulder stock. I also have to mention the fact that the detachable box magazine slid through the base of the grip, because this is also the time where self-loading were so new that they were trying to figure out where the magazine actually went. At first, most of them, the magazine was in front of the trigger guard, which is so cool. Of course,
Yeah.
you have the classics like the C96 Mauser, but also you had the there's that really cool one that is used in the Mandalorian. Mando's
That's
gun. It's got a weird name to it, and I can't remember it off the top of my head, but it is that one held 5 rounds in a magazine in front of the handguard. So they were like experimenting where rounds actually go. So at this time for this design, I do have to mention that the magazine went into the base, the grip. On paper, it was an absolute powerhouse, one of the most powerful handguns ever made, firing a hefty 230 grain bullet at a blistering 1,180 feet per second. In terms of raw firepower, it could even give modern magnums a run for their money. And I actually have something for that. Of course, they did trials and stuff like that, and I managed to find a table showing their trials against different pistols. So we have a table here that they trialed, and this is the specifics. So they trialed it up against the Colt revolver, which, of course, they just give generic names. They're not very specific. I had to go kind of searching for these. But you have the Colt revolver. They say Colt automatic, which would make you think it would be the M1911. However, this is a trial in 1902. So this is probably more the Colt M1902, which is like the predecessor to the M1911.
Yeah.
Which still looks cool. It looks odd compared to an M1911, but it looks cool.
Yeah,
and then
it doesn't have the backstrap safety.
Yeah, and then it also has Mauser automatic, which the only Mauser automatic pistol I know of is the C96. So that's the calibers sort of match.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, just looking at raw data, you have the Colt revolver, which is caliber 4.55. Weight of the bullet is 265 grams. Is it grams? GRS?
Grains.
Sorry. Charge of powder is 18 grains. Muzzle velocity 700 feet per second with energy of 287 foot-pounds. Colt automatic is in 360. Weight is 105. Charge of powder is 7.8. Fires at 1260 feet per second with energy of 364. And the Mauser being in .300. Weight of a bullet is 85. Only has 7.75 grains of powder. Fires at 1400 feet per second with energy of 379. And now they trialed with 3 of the Mars calibers, the 450, the 360, and the 335, also known as the 8.5mm. Or 8mm, depends on how you round it. So the 450 or the 450 Mars has a bullet weight of 220, has a powder charge of 12 grains, muzzle velocity 1,250 feet per second compared to the Colt revolver, which is only 700, and has an energy in foot-pounds of 760. Significant increase there.
That's significantly more, yes.
That will definitely do some damage.
Yeah, to ruin your day.
The Marzen 360 has a bullet weight of 160 grains, has a powder charge of 12 grains again, muzzle velocity 1,640 feet per second, and energy of 969 foot-pounds.
Oof.
And of course, the last one, the 335, has a weight of 140, charge of 10, muzzle velocity of 1750, and energy of 950. So I think we can assume the Mars is pretty powerful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, those will definitely ruin your day. So, yeah, Mars, pretty powerful. Gabbett Fairfax had poured years of work and a great deal of money into this pistol. They only made 80 of them, by the way.
Oh.
And each one of them is different to the next. You can't interchange parts because they have slight, sometimes major design differences. If you want to see those differences, Gun Jesus has a couple of videos on Mars Automatic, and he points out, he has 2 of them, and he just points out this myriad of differences in the design of how they built them. So, hence why they're all so rare, all 80 of them. Do you know how much they go for?
Something ridiculous.
Between 35 and 70 grand each.
Yeah, that's ridiculous.
Yeah. So, yeah. He poured years of work onto this. He was determined to see it succeed. When things fell apart, on the back. So the Mars uses a long recoil system. The barrel and bolt remain locked together immediately after firing, and the recoil rearward is as one assembly for a relatively long distance, allowing chamber pressure to fall between the breech before the breech opens. Springs under the barrel compress during the rearward travel. It has 2 springs, by the way, hence the heavy bloody draw. Underneath, 2 springs on either, one on sitting next to each other. Now, here's where the fun starts. The unusual cartridge feeding system in action during the recoil. Now, the Mars pistol, if you have a look at the magazine, it has this big latch over the top, which stops bullets going up or forward. That is because the Mars pistol operates by bringing the bullet backwards. Yes. So when this whole block, when the block slides back, it has 2 lugs that catches the bullet and brings them back. Brings the bullet backwards.
Wait, you pulled the trigger? That's step 1?
Adds to the sort of mechanical complexity of this thing. So instead of a simple rammer, the Mars employs a mechanical lifter or elevator, depends on how you want to call it. During the recoil stroke, the mechanism pulls the next cartridge rearwards out of the magazine.
Okay, I thought you meant
then lifts the round up into the breech
first.
feeding line. So what happens is the bullet is brought back. The one that's just fired gets flicked out because of that. The hammer then actually presses the elevator up to push the next bullet up into the breech. During this time, you have the... Yep. You can see why you wouldn't want this in a military setting. It's way too complex. This has taken me an age just to describe how it just extracts the next round out of the bloody magazine. So then you have the bolt rotation, unlock, and extraction, ejection. At or near the end of the rearward travel, the bolt rotates to unlock the barrel. The spent case is extracted and ejected rearwards. Not to the side, to the rear. Like to point out, what's to the rear of a handgun?
Damn.
Yes. Uh, barrel returns under spring force. So the barrel will return forward, but the bolt remains open. The bolt release is the trigger. Believe it or not, they actually implemented this because you have this elevator lift thing and all these parts moving at the same time, right? A lot of the times, if it would recoil under its own
Huh.
vice, the
Okay.
bullet wouldn't seat itself properly. There wasn't enough time for moving parts to move where it needed to be. So early productions, they found this issue. Later, they redesigned it. So you pulled the trigger, barrel goes back forward, but then the slide wouldn't release until you let the trigger go. Yeah. So the delayed bolt release. Yeah. Yeah, you could say that. So the Mars incorporates a delay, so the bolt is not released immediately. It is tested in the tested designs. The bolt was held to the rear until the shooter released the trigger, a deliberate timing feature. At which point the bolt is freed to move forward. This differs from many later semi-autos that release the bolt automatically as part of the recoil return cycle. That is because it would jam up on itself because it was firing too fast for this.
That's
All the mechanics.
interesting.
There are a lot of moving parts in this thing. And then you have the forward bolt
hell
travel,
no.
chambering, and locking. Once released, the bolt is driven forward by its springs. It strips the cartridge from the lifter or feeder or elevator, whatever you want to call it. Pushes the round into the chamber, and then you have and then rotates into the locked position to re-establish a locked breech. Pistol is then ready for the next shot. You'll see right here. So when you actually chamber this, or cock it or anything like that, you actually have to twist these two lugs to open it to get it to feed the next round in. Yeah, field stripping this, you would lose so many parts field stripping this thing. So with the bolt locked and the barrel forward, the system is reset. The cycle repeats on the next discharge. Trial reports emphasize the heavy recoil, strong bolt movement, and the awkward rearward ejection, which contributed to the design's rejection. So you can see here in this next diagram, so the round is lifted up by the hammer. All of this is all held by the trigger back. The barrel's gone forward, and then you're back ready to go. That is the massive hammer as well, by the way. It's giant. The instructions for field stripping, by the way, is a full page.
Huh.
So, found himself
This is all
broke,
too complicated.
declaring bankruptcy in 1903. Webley Scott and a few others in Birmingham turned out small batches afterwards, but total production probably never topped 80. By 1906, the Mars project was dead. Which is a shame, but you couldn't have screwed up a gun any more than this. I mean, it is a cool looking gun, I gotta say. Like, it's got that old timey steampunk 1900s style to it. But of course, nowadays most people don't mind shooting high caliber pistols with a lot of recoil, but that's because shooting has changed, right? Nowadays it's the two-handed grip, lean forward, all of that, a proper shooting stance. Of course, this is 1900s. The shooting style back then was single hand, braced up against basically your rib cage with a bent shoulder, and firing like that, which is a very weak style. Single arm, forward, bent elbow. That's asking for carpal tunnel syndrome, broken wrists, especially for something this powerful. Could you imagine firing something like your automag like that? Would you even consider trying that? Yeah, so you imagine firing the equivalent of that, maybe slightly less powerful than that, but with the 1900s stance. It's you. I think that's one of the reasons.
Yeah.
But of course, at the same time, like when this handgun was being made, the alternatives,
Jeez.
so self-loading, were usually in smaller calibers, but they were plentiful. Plentiful. Around the same time, you had stuff like the Colt Model 1902, which was fairly good. You had the P08 Luger, which yes, still complex, but worked. The C96 Mauser. You had the FN. Uh, what was it? The Ruby. Yeah, you had the FN Ruby. Yeah, there were all these other self-loading pistols, which were usually in
Yeah. Almost
380,
be like carrying around a
320,
bag of
360, or
fucking flour with you all day,
9mm
or a high
and
point.
45. They all did perfectly fine, so there wasn't really a need for a 450 Mars with that much power and that much complexity, to be honest. So you can see why it's just he had the right idea, but it was just yeah. Because he's British. The British don't like taking suggestions. But of course, yeah. But yeah, that was the Mars pistol. I mean, it
Hmm.
looks great. I'm sure nowadays it would actually be a bit fun to fire, even though scary as fuck. But I
Oh,
would certainly give it a go. But a
yeah.
mechanical nightmare, especially for that time. Like the fact you have things that
Yeah.
rotate at the same time, things are being pulled backwards and then lifted up, pushed forward, all at the same time is just yeah. Uh, I mean that system works for shotguns because you dictate when rounds go forward. Same again for say the Lebel
Oh, I bet.
1887. That has the same sort of feature of using the lifting gate and stuff like that. But again, they're
Uh-huh.
all done manually. They're trying to do this automatically, and it's just automatic just works too fast. But yeah, so yeah,
Hmm.
so that was the Mars automatic pistol. We'd like to
Oh,
thank you for joining us for this quick little episode. Don't forget, you can check us out on our main other podcast, the Micro Machines podcast, where we talk about real life subjects and how to build models of them. But before that, we'd just like to say thank you very much for listening. This is a brand new podcast for us, so this is only episode 3. We'll mock them. Until then, we will see you guys all in the next episode.